Hey guys, XPT here, and today I'll be making a video on the Void game tree. So I want to just make a general basic video on the openers for the Void game tree because it's going to lead to a lot of future compositions that are very strong in today's meta. The reason for this is because Cho'Gath is still one of the strongest champions in the entire game, and with the addition of the 6 Brawlers buff, it gives 1000 bonus health now. You're able to get some compositions with 6 Brawlers, and Vi is also a big addition to the game. Vi is extremely powerful now, and she also added a big boost to the Brawler compositions. She works very well with Blitzcrank as well. So the Void and Brawlers game tree and game path is still very powerful. It basically will consist of Cho'Gath and Rek'Sai in the late game, and either Kassadin or Kha'Zix. Which champion you get will totally depend on what you want to go into. If you want to go into Sorcerers, you will inevitably end up with Kassadin. If you want to go into Assassins, you'll end up with Kha'Zix. Now, that being said, there is also one other path where you end up with Jinx or sometimes even Draven, where it won't matter too much which of the two out of Kha'Zix or Kassadin you get. You just pick whichever one which is stronger, basically. So the only person in the late game you really want items on will be Cho'Gath. He's going to be one of your carries. You want a Morello's on him. GA is a good second item on him, although not as mandatory as before because it got nerfed. For a third item, you basically can put whatever the game gives you. If you get like too many giant spells, you can put on a Warmogs. You can put on like any AP or mana items, so Onyx Spark, stuff like Yumi's, Seraphs work well on him as well. But I'd say Morello's is the most important, otherwise it will be Guardian Angel will be a good second item, but not essential. Even Morello's is not absolutely essential now because of the emergence of Vi. Vi has proven herself to be extremely powerful now. Vi is a very strong brawler. She's a 3-cost unit, arguably now the best 3-cost unit in the entire game. It used to be between Poppy and Kennen, who was the strongest. Now Vi has took that spot, I think. And also with the emergence of Jinx, Gangplank has become very strong this patch as well. So instead of putting items onto Cho'Gath, you could put items onto Vi, especially if you have a tough time finding Cho'Gath or upgrading him early to tier 2. The items will be better on Vi. If you're having a high roll game or you're getting too many Morello components and Guardian Angel components, obviously you can put items on both of them. But this will be the basis of the Void and Brawler game tree. You want to have these two plus one of these, and then you'll usually have 2 more Brawlers. Most of the times it's going to be Blitzcrank. And Vi, sometimes you'll even end up getting 6 Brawlers. It depends on the team composition you go for. So the Void game tree is so diverse, and you can go into a number of different endgame compositions, which is why I'm going to split this video guide into 3 or 4 parts, basically, because this video will just be covering the basics, the idea behind most of the comps, and the openers. But in future videos, I will try to go over the specific team compositions. So let's quickly go over the different build path you can go into once you start from the Void game tree. And it's great because you can have a strong early game with Void and Brawlers, and then you can build into any of these depending on what items you get and what units are given to you through the game, basically. So as we see here, there's 3 different build paths you can go into. On the left, we have the hypercarry build path. If we want to go into this build path, what we're looking for are a lot of attack damage and attack speed items. So as we see, we got Jinx and Draven. Jinx will be the primary carry that you're looking for. However, if you can't find Jinx, Draven will work just fine. Out of these 2 units, you want to have 3 of these 6 items on one of your carries. So personally, I love RFC, Infinity Edge, and Bloodthirster on Draven. But for Jinx, she's still a new champion. People haven't figured out what are the best 3 items on her yet. It probably may also depend on what the team composition around her is. But if you put 3 out of these 6 items on her, they'll be good. I've also heard that Hextech Gunblade works well. I've heard that Static Shiv works well on her. I've heard Guardian Angels work well on her. So there's a lot of options. But if you get one of these 2 units, build 3 out of these 6 items, and you will be just fine. If you want to go into this game tree and end up with a composition that has Jinx or Draven, look out for these items and look out for some early Gangplanks. Gangplank is a unit you want whenever you go into a build that consists of a Draven or Jinx carry, because he can help you to transition through the early to mid game until you find these units. Gangplank can use a red buff plus Guardian Angels very well. I'd say these 2 items work very well, although since he's not your primary carry, you don't need to put items on him. Although it's always better if he has them. He's going to do a ton of damage to the back line, and he applies the burn damage through his ability, which is really good. I prefer red buff because his auto attacks also deal burn damage that way, but some people prefer Morello's. It also works well. I also prefer red buff because like you're gonna end up building Morello's on someone else usually anyways. The idea behind the Void Brawlers and a hypercarry is basically pretty simple. You want your Void and Brawlers to be tanking a lot of damage, take a while to die, and just soak up the damage while your hypercarries kill everyone. Pretty simple, and the 2 units are interchangeable. It's important to note though that when I go into the Brawler comp, I tend to prefer going with Jinx because of Vi. Vi is one of the strongest Brawlers in the entire game, as we already mentioned. That being said, let's move on to probably the most popular variation of the Void Brawler build, where you will be building into Sorcerers. So over here we got Ahri and Aurelion Sol. Ahri will be the main carry you look out for in the early game, and quite often you keep her throughout the entire game. And Aurelion Sol is going to be the AP carry you look for in the late game. The items that they like to use will be mana and magic damage reliant. So if you get to put a Luden's Echo on Ahri on her in the early game, she's going to be very, very powerful, and especially if you pair Ahri up early with Warwick and like some other brawlers in the early game, she's going to attack very fast, and that's why Static Shiv will be a great item on her as well. And Luden's Echo Ahri with Wild Buff is going to be able to get you to level 6 or 7 very healthily, usually. Morello's is another very good item on her. If you do sell her later, you can put the Morello's onto Cho'Gath. The other items can go onto Aurelion Sol. Aurelion Sol will be your late game carry. You don't actually need to build too much AP because his ult can one-shot a lot of units when you 2-star him. Very strong unit in the late game. What you want is you want to be able to proc his ult as often as possible. That's why you put attack speed items and mana regeneration items on him. These three are good examples of items. It doesn't need to be this. You could also put on an RFC that works on him, attack speed, and it keeps in the back. So as you see, even if you're building into like a hypercarry or assassin build, and you have a RFC early, if you pick up a bunch of Aurelion Sols in the late game, you could still just transition into the Soul comp just fine. Shojin's also works well to build mana. Seraphs works well. Stuff like Death Cap gives additional damage. It also works very well. The idea behind the Sorcerer comp is, again, quite simple. You have your Brawlers who are tanking, and then you've got your Sorcerers who will just deal a load of damage, and it's going to be burst damage that will one-shot a lot of squishy units. Finally, we got the Assassin variation. The Assassin variation usually goes with Rengar as your main carry. Rengar is really strong when he's got a wild buff, so again, you're going to use Warwick usually to give him the wild buff. Wild is going to give him a lot of attack speed. Right now it's 12% attack speed. They keep on buffing wild, so even though Rengar got nerfed last patch, he kind of fell off, but with the new buff, he is back. Also, it has something to do with the changes in the meta, I think. Like, Brawlers don't do too great against Assassins, and whenever I play with Assassins now, it just feels really good for some reason. Not too sure why it feels so good, but it's working very well. So, you're going to pair up Rengar with Kha'Zix and one more assassin. Right now, Evelynn has made a big emergence in the meta. Akali was the more popular choice before, but Evelynn appears to have made the emergence this patch. Another good choice will be Pyke. However, now Pyke is less popular because he's been constantly getting nerfed. These are good items on Evelynn, and these are good items on Akali. They will be your secondary carries to Rengar. That being said, there is also another variation of the Assassin's build, where instead of going with Rengar carry, you just go with 4 ninjas. So you're going to go with 4 ninjas because ninjas keep on getting buffed. It's a bit of a weird build. It just started to be used. I tried it out a few times, and again, it's surprising to me how well it does. It feels really good. So these are the 3 final variations of the builds. It's important to note that it's going to be quite easy to navigate your way into all 3 of these. Like, you just want a good void opener, and you want to build items that will generally do well on everyone. So for example, Static Shiv will do fine on most of the champions. RFC will do fine on most of these champions. Stuff like Shojin's, Morello's red buff can also be used on multiple different champions. And then in the late game, you're gonna, at level 7 or level 6, you're gonna be given units that will steer you into the direction that you want to go. In general, you could even just go for the Rengar build if you're picking up early Rengars, put on these items on him, but then all of a sudden you pick up a bunch of Dravens and Jinxes, and then you could end up with a hypercarry build all of a sudden. It's very, very flexible. There's a lot of variety and versatility, and this is one of the things that makes it so strong. The toughest part of the build might be getting Cho'Gath to level 2, although with its versatility, that's not even too much of an issue anymore. So all that being said, let's move on to some openers and what you want to look out for in order to move into a Void and Brawler build. Please remember that I will elaborate on each of these in the future. Today we just focus on the openers, what you can end up with, and what you want to look out for when going into a Void build. Now let's move on to talking about the openers. So the openers you want to look out for will be basically all the brawlers and any wild, and obviously any void. On the left here we have an opener. The most obvious opener will basically include 3 void plus any extra unit. Here we got 3 void plus another brawler. This third unit could be anything. It could be 3 void plus like Z. These will be level 4 openers. It's obviously, even if you have like 3 void and then you've got another upgraded unit, let's say you pick up something like a Garen 2 or something, there's nothing wrong with having a Garen inside there as well, just to help. The important thing is just you got your 3 void buff. That's going to be pretty cool. In the early game at level 4, you can either put items on this third person who you'll probably get rid of or maybe you'll use, or otherwise you can put items onto these guys. Kha'Zix uses Luden's Echo very well. This can help you through the early game. If you plan on using Kha'Zix in the future, such as in an assassin comp, you probably want to grab extra copies of him to sell. Or you can just keep the Ludens on him throughout the game. It's not bad. However, if you put more items than just a Ludens, you probably want to end up selling him later, which means pick some other copies up. Kassadin actually works really well with attack damage and attack speed items in the early game. Putting an RFC on him early is really effective. It means he's going to be able to mana drain people from a way back range. The problem with Kassadin is late game he loses his power, obviously, but in the early game you can put on a bunch of attack speed and attack damage items, and he's going to be very effective. Later on you can transfer those items onto somebody such as Jinx, Draven, Rengar. Over here we got a 2 brawler comp, and then we got 3 wilds as well. You can put attack damage and attack speed items onto Nidalee for your future hypercarry or assassins, and Ahri can use the mana or magic damage items. Here we got 2 wild and 3 sorcerers. This Lulu could also, for example, be Twisted Fate. And Twisted Fate, you could put items such as Shiv, RFC, Shoujins, so items that you would futurely want to put onto Aurelion Sol. This is an ideal start if you want to go into a Sorc comp, basically. But it's important to note, even from this, you can transition into an attack damage based comp. You just give this to Kha'Zix, or maybe even Cho'Gath later. You put this on Vi or Cho'Gath, you give the static shifts and attack speed items onto your assassins or hypercarries. We got some more examples of openers that would work well for the Void and Brawler start. Here we got 4 Brawlers, very, very powerful in the early game. If you manage to get this at level 4, I'd suggest to almost always put it in, even if every single Brawler is only 1-starred, because they get a really huge health buff. It's 600 health. It's going to be extremely powerful at this stage in the game. It's going to pretty much single-handedly carry you to even level 6. Then you can also do, let's say, Rek'Sai plus Kha'Zix and 2 more assassins. This way you'll have 3 assassins. It's also a good start. You can put attack speed and attack damage items onto Zed. Sometimes you'll end up keeping him, sometimes you'll end up selling him. It depends how the game goes. But so you want to probably put items that are relevant on him. RFC works extremely well on him. Infinity Edge too. Shojins and Morellos also work well on Pike. You usually sell Pike later on nowadays, and these items transfer very well to carries such as Cho'Gath, Vi, Aurelion Sol. Finally, we have 2 brawlers and 2 assassins. Like, basically, you just gather a strong team composition that is focused around brawlers, wild, or void in the early game. And you put out the strongest team you can, you put the items on relevant people, and you build your team composition from. These openers will transfer well into assassin comps, obviously. However, you could also put these items onto Draven or Jinx in the future. At levels 5 and 6, you want to start deciding in which direction you want to actually go in. So over here, we've got 3 Void and 2 Wild with Ahri as a carry. Ahri should have a Ludens probably in this situation. And this is pointing towards a Void Sork comp. Here we got 3 Void and 3 Assassins. It's pointing towards an Assassin's comp, although you could also pivot into a hypercarry comp with the items that Rengar might have, which would be RFC plus Bloodthirster. And if you do use the Assassin comp, you want a GA as the 3rd item. Over here we got 4 brawlers plus 1 carry. In this situation we got Ahri, but it could be really any single carry that you want. It could be Rengar, it could be like, let's say, Varus, maybe, if you find him in the early game instead. You can put pretty much any items on him for like AP and attack damage, attack speed, both work on him in the early game, and later pivot into the composition of your choice. So from this point onwards, you've kind of got an idea of what direction you're heading, and you're picking up the units you want for your final team comp. In the next videos, we're going to talk more specifically about the 3 options, which we said were the hypercarry, the sorcerers, or the assassins. And in order to not make this video too long, we'll split the videos into separate parts. So this video just explained the Void openers, what you want to look out for. Obviously, you don't want to go into Void if you pick up a bunch of knights or nobles at the start of the game or something. It's much easier to make a smooth transition if you pick these types of units up to go into the Void game tree. So this will be it for today. In the following videos, we'll talk about some more specific late game team compositions that you want to build out of this start. Thank you for watching.